Hey everyone, welcome to the sixth lesson on optimizing cases consider. Now in this case, you might be wondering, what does this optimizing cases considered means? Well, in the fifth lesson I talked about how you can take values to solve the question. Now this is just a continuation of it, and it's going to be a very short video where I'm going to talk about certain questions where you may, after looking at the question, feel that taking values makes sense. Okay, but ideally solving those questions will be much more easy if you simply take the methodical approach to solve the question instead of taking values. So just consider the cases that are required and then approach the question in a methodical way. Okay. So in short, what I'm trying to say is that taking values in certain questions might be fine, but you really need to decide whether you need to do it in that particular question or not, whether it will increase your calculation time or whether it will actually help you solve the question within 2 minutes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a question and I am going to solve that question in by telling you how you can solve it without taking values, and why did I take a call of solving this question with by not taking values. Okay, so once again, you can pause the video, solve this question once if you want to. Otherwise, you can just move along with me and see my thought process. Now, we have been given an expression x squared is equal to 3y plus 7. We are told that x and y are integers, and we must figure out which of the following, that the 5 options that are given to us, which one of them is even. Now, after looking at this question, the first thing that you might come to your mind is, hey, it's a question on even odd. So mostly there are only 2 possible cases, even and odd. So maybe I can take values and solve the question, right? So that is a valid question that might come in your mind. Now, the next question that might come in your mind is that how many cases should I consider? Now, the reason this question might come in your mind is because there are 2 variables, x and y. Okay, so it's quite possible that you may think in this way, that there's a possibility that if when x is even, y could be even or odd. Okay, and if x is odd, then y again could be even or odd. So basically there are 4 possible cases, that the ones that I've written here, depending on 2 variables that might come in your mind. Okay, so you need to think how many cases you need to consider also. There is another factor that you need to take into account. Now this can be easily resolved, and you can easily figure out whether you want to take values or not, or how many cases you want to consider, by just focusing on 2 things. One is what is given. Okay, so in this case it is given that x squared is equal to 3y plus 7, and we also know that we need to find out cases where one of the option must always be even. And after looking at this, you should be able to infer that, okay, whatever be the value of x or y, whatever value I take, one option will always be even. And this should be an indicator that I can take values and solve the question. Whatever value I'll take, I'll get the answer. Okay, but how many values should I take is the question that you need to think of. Okay, now one way to think of is about the even odd nature first. Okay, we don't know anything about the even odd nature of x and y. We also do not know about the even odd nature of x also. So obviously, to solve this question, you need to consider take one of the variables and start from there. So let's start with x and say I take values. I take x equal to 6 and x equal to 5. Okay, now when I take any value, I need to make sure that all the constraints are satisfied. So one of the constraint is this expression, and the other constraint is that both are integers. Now notice, if you put x equal to 6 here, because say randomly I've taken 6, you might have taken 1, 2, whatever. But if you put 6 here, you'll get 36. And if you try to find out the value of y, you'll notice y will not come as integer. So that means the value 6 is not an optimal value. Okay, and the process is also not very optimal, because now you have to decide the values of x. What values of x should I take that will help me get integral values of y? Okay, and keep in mind that is not even the agenda here. Your agenda is to just figure out what cases should you consider, what even odd nature of x and y should you consider to get the answer. And here, since you're trying to take values and figure out the integral values of y, you are wasting your time. Because some cases might work, some might not work, and you will have to then take some other value and check. And again, that is like a to and fro kind of case, which is a wastage of time. But the best way obviously would be to think in this way, that hey, x can be either even or odd, right? And that is the reason I took 6 and 5, one even, one odd. So why not just take two cases? And that can be done by, first of all, writing this, because see, if I'm fixing x, I need to take x to one side and y to the other side. So let me write it like this, and let me take two cases. First case is that x is even. So I'm not dealing with values here. I'm just taking the nature, because that is what I'm interested in. So when x is even, y will turn out to be odd. And you can see here, because if you put even here, instead of x square, you replace it with even minus odd is odd. And if you take odd times y is equal to odd, then obviously y has to be odd. The other case possible is when x is odd. So you're taking both the cases. Okay. And when you're taking x is equal to odd, you'll notice y turns out to be even. Because when you put odd, odd minus odd is even, and if odd times y is even, then that definitely means that y has to be even. So notice that there are only two cases possible. In none of these scenarios am I getting stuck, and in none of these scenarios is it happening that there are two possibilities of y. For one unique value of x, there is only one unique value of y. And the interesting thing here is that they are opposite in nature. So when x is even, y is odd, and when x is odd, y is even. And that means that you need to just consider these two cases to solve the question, these two scenarios. So notice how I optimized my case here, and I decided against taking values to solve the question. Maybe if I would have spent 30 seconds or more, I could have figured out a value which I needed to take. But why take that risk when I know I'm just looking for the nature? Okay, now this might seem very trivial at this point of time, but believe me, there are a lot of questions where this plays a major role, and I'm going to give you 1-2 questions where you'll see taking values does not make any sense at all. Okay, now with this in mind, that there are only two possible values, I need to consider two cases. When x is even, y is odd, and when x is odd, y is even. And I need to take each option one by one and see in which case am I getting even in both the scenarios. So if you notice, if I take the first option, okay, 2 plus x times y plus 3, what I can see here is that even plus even times, when you put x as even and y as odd, you see in one scenario you're getting even, and the other scenario you're getting odd. If you take the next option, x plus 8y square, you'll notice that in the first case you're getting even, but in the other case you're getting odd. If you take the third one, again 6x is always even, but if you take the first case and you get odd, see, notice I'm not going to check my second case. Why? Because if the first case is giving me odd, then that means it doesn't make sense to check the second case. Okay. Now let's take the fourth case, 9x squared minus 13y. Now here in the first case, you will get odd once again, and since you're getting odd, you can simply say, hey, I don't need to check any further, this is not needed. So I'm even not wasting time here. I'm looking at odd, I don't need to check the other one, I'm saving time here. And in the last case, obviously, if nothing else works, the last has to be your answer, and you can even check it. Even times odd is odd, and odd times odd is even, so this would give you even. And in the second case, this becomes odd times odd is even, so it gives even, so this has to be the correct answer. So the correct answer in this case is option E. So again, a very simple question, but the main thing that I wanted to tell you here is that just try and figure out the cases. And if you realize while figuring out the cases, taking values does not make sense, because it will increase your calculation and you may have to figure out a very specific value of x to get a specific value of y. In some scenarios like this, it's best to avoid it and go with the methodical route. So the main learning here is that just figure out what cases are needed, and in those scenarios pre-analysis helps. So those of you who are wondering what is pre-analysis, I would strongly suggest that you watch the first lesson where I've talked about pre-analysis, how you need to do it, what is the best way to do it. Okay, some of you who took more than 2 minutes to solve the question, if you did, well, I believe one of the reasons is that you decide to take values to solve the question. If you take values to solve the question, then that means you'll take a lot of time, because you have to figure out what are the right values to take. You may also end up making a calculation mistake. Well, the reason could be taking the values. Now, if you're taking values and when you're checking each and every option, it's a possible that you might make a silly mistake and end up getting the wrong answer. And obviously a reason obviously could be a weak conceptual knowledge. If you are not very good with even odd, the concept of even odd, then there's a high chance that you may still miss out on solving this question within 2 minutes, even if you take values or without taking values. Okay, so again, as I told you, it's a very short video, and I hope this was you got some learning from it. So guys, the main thing that I want you to keep in mind is that it's not always required for you to take values, and taking values is not always the best way to solve the question. So you need to be able to take that call in the beginning or while doing a pre-analysis whether you want to take values to solve the question or not. If it doesn't make sense, go with the optimal route, the methodical route, and believe me, that would be much more fast and you'll get the answer much more quickly. Okay. So now I'm going to give you 2 questions based on just this. Try it out, see whether taking values makes sense or not, and if it doesn't, then go with the methodical route to solve the question. All the best, guys.